spotlight.
Okay.
For now.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Annie. All right. Everyone, people are joining. Hello, everyone who's joining right now. Welcome. We're just going to wait just for 1 minute till as many people need to enter the room come in. Very glad to have you here today. Since we don't have very much time, I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds and then we're going to start right off. Okay, so I'm going to begin. Hi, everyone. We are really pleased to have all of you with us today for this learning event on child participation on research and violence. Welcome from me, Aisha from SVRI, and on behalf of my colleague, Anik, also from SVRI. We have some great panelists with us who are extremely experienced in this field and will be sharing some of their insights with us. We're very aware that this is a huge area and 1 hour is not enough to do it justice. But what we are hoping is that it provides a platform for learning, for sparking interest, to provide practical insights and ideas, and then also to link people with what they need to go further. So we will reference useful links in the chat box. This should also help people hopefully to get a sort of starter kit of resources together. So we really hope you enjoy it. We have 1 hour. It's going to be quick, and please, remember to post questions as they come up in the chat box. We will have 10 minutes at the end to answer your questions. Thank you very much for being here. I'm now going to hand over to our moderator, Joanna, who is a researcher at the Empowering Children Foundation in Poland. This foundation is one of the biggest organizations in Poland and the local leader for Central and Eastern Europe in the field of violence against children. Joanna has extensive experience in conducting qualitative and quantitative surveys in the field of violence against children. And I think I've said enough. So over to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Aisha. I'm very happy that I can be part of this learning event because the issue of child participation is very important for me. On the one hand, it's important because we can have better data from when we talk to children as participants, also during the process of gathering data, but also because we can, this is a tool with which we can empower children with difficult experiences like violence and abuse. So it's very important to do research in which children can participate. So thank you very much for bringing this topic. And now I will get over to Camille. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you, Joanna. Lovely to be here. I'm Camille Warrington. I'm a senior research fellow at the University of Bedfordshire in the Safer Young Lives Research Centre, which is an applied research centre which focuses on researching violence and abuse against children and young people, but with a particular focus on adolescents. And we have particular expertise around researching sexual violence. I have a kind of long-standing interest and kind of practice around integrating participatory principles in our research, and I'm part of a team called the Our Voices programme of research, which is Oak-funded international research exploring children's participation rights and sexual violence in research, and I'll speak a bit more about that later. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Anita.
Thank you very much, Camille. My name is Anita Burgundisako. I come from Serbia, Belgrade, University of Belgrade, Faculty of Political Science. I'm assistant professor in social work, and my biggest interest is in empowering children, child resilience, as well as adolescents' resilience in trauma-informed care. I'm also head of Research Center of Social Policy and Social Work in Belgrade University, And I'm very grateful for being here with you and for this opportunity to share my knowledge and experiences in this area. So I will invite Lucy now to present herself.
Thank you very much, Anita. My name's Lucy Jameson. I'm based at the Children's Institute, which is part of the University of Cape Town. And we run a number of research projects that include participatory elements from the early years right through to adolescence. And we are also beginning now to turn our investigative lens onto the intersections of violence against women and children. So looking across the life course and trying to make sure, you know, that we are engaging in participatory methods across all of those different projects that have a focus on violence. And personally, you know, I've been involved both in the work that the Institute does on child protection and violence, but I've also, for a number of years, almost 2 decades, been looking at children's participation and doing actual research on how we you know, engage children both in research and in activism and advocacy. And I'm also part of a group called the International Canadian Child Rights Partnership, and we've been looking at children's participation in international child protection. And again, we're expanding that lens now to look at intergenerational partnerships. So that's me. Thank you very much. And it's really great to be here. I see there's a broad spectrum of people at different levels and from different parts of the world that are in that participant list. So looking forward to engaging with you today.
Thank you, Lucy. Aisha, will you show us the video?
I thought we'd do that after Lucy's presentation, Joanna.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so Lucy, can you give us an overview of the field that we can start, after that we can start the discussion. We can't hear you, Lucy.
I said, okay, great. I could talk about this for not just hours, but days. So I'm going to give you really what is a whistle-stop tour of children's participation in research. Are you seeing the right screen? Okay, yes. Fabulous. So just, you know, to ground this conversation, I think we have to acknowledge that globally, you know, there is a spotlight on violence against children at the moment, and it has been adopted at really high levels. So we've got buy-in, and there's a lot of support for generating data. You know, we've got investment in research to look at effective prevention and response measures, you know, but also that there's also that commitment to seeing participation and children's participation in key documents like Inspire. So what we're doing today is really giving you a very brief overview of the kinds of research that's been done with children and an array of the support available that will help build researchers' capacity to conduct ethical research with children. So if we're looking at some of the examples of participatory research, I think some of the most well-known one is the United Nations study on violence against children done in the early 2000s. We saw an incredible spectrum in terms of the roles that children played there, from advising on the design, actually conducting some of the field work, being facilitators, and then of course working with the results to make sure that their recommendations that they had made were understood at both global and national levels. As well as that kind of global scale, we've got cross-sectional surveys. We've got work that's been done, indicator work. Examples here, we've got the Living Lab that's at a city level, looking at indicators on violence prevention. Again, another thing that most of you will be familiar with are the violence against children surveys. Those are done at a national level. And again, they're really looking at how children can be involved. The different national surveys are involving children in different ways, some of them simply in terms of promoting the findings, others right through from design, tailoring the surveys to the national context, and making sure that children are part of that data collection. We've also got numerous examples of children actually leading research themselves. So in the previous examples, they would be what would be called consultative or collaborative research, but we've got examples around the world of children conducting in India on child marriage. We've seen in places like Chile, work where children led research on bullying. We've had discrimination-based violence in Brazil, a couple of countries in Africa looking at teen pregnancy. And we can see in that child-led research everything from, you know, very simple methods, things like community mapping, games being used, through to in recent years, digital platforms that are dedicated to supporting children to actually participate and lead research. And that's an example there called Tiga, that's a mobile phone app that allows children to actually do data collection with other children. We've also got what's been a phenomenal advance, I think, in the last kind of 5 to 7 years, has been that there's been the development of tools and resources. And of course, anybody who's doing any kind of research with children, what is, you know, the absolute starting point for most people is the platform was originally published as a book called, known affectionately as ERIC, Ethical Research and Involving Children. It has developed substantially into an online platform where you can get advice on how to adopt ethical methods. They've got a Twitter feed that gives regular updates, and critically, they've got access to experts through the blog and through different events. We've also got dedicated platforms that look at doing research on violence. So there's the children's, the Centre for Children's Rights, led by Laura Lundy in Queen's University, Belfast, one of the leading lights of children's participation. They've got a project called Participation for Protection, and a number of the resources there have been produced in collaboration with children and young people, for children and young people. So very useful, again, platforms. We've got the End Violence platform, where they're also, again, these are specialist resources that are looking at tools to support participatory research on violence against children, giving us information about how to do it, but also what kinds of studies have been done in the past and what might be appropriate for your setting. There's also, you know, a vast array of now short, sharp, very well curated tools and videos on Save the Children's Resource Centre, but also do look at their YouTube channel. They've got some lovely videos that, because they're short, they can be shared on social media networks and are quite accessible. These days, there's a growing level, a very large level. The majority of children, even in low and middle income countries, have access to social media. You may in your projects have to support them with data in order to afford the costs, but we've now got, as I said, an array of resources that can help you to help children understand the subjects that you're looking at and also what research is all about. And then the other thing that has been flourishing recently is support in the form of partnerships and networks. So there's a lot of effort going into building community practice where we can share the skills and experience to overcome the barriers and improve the experience of children in VAC research. And of course, we're lucky enough to have Camille, who will talk to us about the Our Voices network and the amazing things that that is doing. We've got, as I mentioned, I'm part of the International Canadian Child Rights Partnership. Again, lots of resources and spaces to get people together to collaboratively overcome some of the challenges. So at the moment, we are putting together a multi-country study, and one of the ethical challenges that we have is how to compensate children in different countries. So I'm working in South Africa. In Canada, there's a kind of expectation that children should get $15 an hour. That translates to more than the monthly amount that individuals and adults get for a grant from the government to sustain themselves for a month. So we use that space to have those debates, look at the tools, and as I said, all these networks are there for you to use and to help facilitate children's participation in research. One of the most recent ones is the Coalition for Good Schools. They are obviously looking at, focused on ending violence in schools, but very supportive of participatory methodologies. And they've got hubs in Africa, South America, Latin America, and Asia. So they're also a good supportive partnership and network. And finally, in terms of the spaces for learning and exchange, what we've seen as a development most recently over the, and again, I would say that this is in the last 5 years, is the spaces, the conferences, the forums, the networks that we're using, such as ISPACAN, and the International Society for Child Indicators, are devoting space to sharing knowledge and exchange on participatory methods, but they're also giving space to children. They are, and we've seen spaces that are devoted forums for children and youth, such as the Act Together organization, who bring children in to the spaces called Togetherland, are having sessions that are focusing on research, violence against children, and safety. And of course, last but not least, there is the SVRI, who have done a lot of work. You know, we saw them do a particular focus on engaging children and young people. We with the Being Heard project, they've developed the lessons that they learned there into a toolkit, which sets out minimum standards for participation, not just at the SVRI forum, but in similar kinds of events. And you know, so we're seeing the streams happen. We're also seeing those spaces open up to children and youth. And some of us who are on the panel today will be involved in a special pre-conference workshop at the forthcoming forum in September. So we hope to see you all there. Now, I know that that's pretty much my time up, but just to say, I've given you a very skimming the surface of the types of work that are happening, the levels that they're happening at, and you know, I wanted to focus on where you can get support if you're thinking about plunging in. We're going to now have a Q&A with the panelists, so they'll be able to talk more about the projects that they're involved in, give concrete examples of how to do it and to overcome some of the challenges that come up. So thank you very much. And the slides have got all the web links to these resources. So I will make them available to SVRI to send out so that you can access them easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to jump in here very quickly, Joanna, before handing it over to you, just to say thank you so much, Lucy. And we'll also have a web page on the SVRI website, which will have a recording of this webinar. And as Lucy very kindly has put together all these slides for us, they'll be available to everyone. Very sadly, we had one of our participants who had to drop out at the very last minute today because she was very unwell this morning. And that was Dia from Nepal, who was going to bring in for us some of the youth perspective and the perspective of young people having been involved in research from, the other side, not the researcher side, from the participant side. And since we do not have her with us, unfortunately, we thought we would just show a very short video, which gives a little bit of a perspective of young people giving insights into how to engage with youth in various processes. So it's just a 4-minute video, and I will share that with you right now. And then, Joanna, please feel free to take over from there to moderate the panel discussion. Okay, great. I'm just sharing my screen now.
Learning new things about other countries, and I also like sharing.
Aisha, we are not seeing anything.
Oh, can you not see the video? No. Oh, okay. Okay, that's very strange.
That's better.
Can you see it now?
We can see your computer, yeah, but not video.
Okay. Still not the video? Now can you see the video?
Now, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, there we go again.
And I also like sharing things about my own country. The CYAC gives me just that, and that is the reason why I'm still involved with the CYAC. The activities we do at the beginning and at the end of every meeting makes it easier for everyone to communicate and also participate effectively. This keeps the group together.
For any researchers, youth allies, young people who are really interested in developing youth partnerships or councils, keep in mind that it's okay to not know all the answers when it comes to engaging with youth. There's really no cookie cutter approach, and every community is so different that you would have to alter it a little bit to work for you anyway. I think that all we can do is really approach the table with clear values that everyone's aware of, like the intent to be equal, inclusive, supportive, and collaborative and honest. I think that as long as we all respect each other's ideas and are willing to co-create our council structures, develop clear guidelines with clear expectations so everyone knows what's expected of them, with youth as also equal members of all these discussions. And I think also as long as you prompt youth about their interests, really give them creative freedom, facilitate those honest discussions that I was talking about, and provide them with any additional information they might need to best engage with the topics at hand, I think it'll be successful. Don't be afraid to listen to whatever suggestions or concerns that they have, and I mean, if you're willing to, don't be afraid to try things their way. There's really no specific ideal when it comes to engaging with youth. There's really only real life, And with that, there's a lot of unexpected. I think what matters in the end is that everyone's honest, collaborative, and willing to work together to create really meaningful and empowering partnerships.
So one advice that I would give, it would be to make sure that the youth advisory team in your research has like frequent follow-ups on the research, so they know what actually is happening and what did you find out and what are you doing right now, so all the team can come together and discuss about the main subjects, because if people don't have the information, then they are a little bit lost and they don't know what to do. So I think that's the main thing, like communication and available communication. Make sure that the language that you're using is youth-friendly, not that academic, so they can understand what you're saying. So I think that's the main thing, communication.
It's an amazing thing with this project is the partners and the research assistants, they're phenomenal. They will respond to you, they will accommodate you, they're willing to take time and patience to see where and how they can help you be better with working within the team and just better in life in general. I think one modification would be if we can potentially have more funders, so that way we can have more interactive meetings. It's amazing to see some individuals online, but because of time zone difference and all of that, it makes it difficult for all of us to be in one place. And luckily I got the opportunity to attend CATS in Switzerland, which was amazing. And for example, one of the individuals a part of the team, for the first time I saw her in person. Everything else was just an email and a name. But because of opportunities like these and our project going international even further, it was amazing to actually be a part of a full team and be able to see everyone and how we work together.
Okay, over to you, Joanna.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to talk with you, Camille, Lucy, and Anita, about the project that you led, research project with children. And can you tell us more, at what level did children participate in those projects? How did you do it? Are there any interesting innovations or methods that you can share with us and tell us, and other people can use it? So Anita, can you start?
Yes, thank you. I would like to share my experiences on participation. Pardon my English, it is not my mother tongue. Methods that we have developed during these last two researches with migrant children. Currently, we are still working on the research of violence against migrant children on Balkan route. And in this research, we had this innovation regarding the training of field researchers, which included both training with field researchers and translators, because so far we had found out that translators in research also take an important role, and that it is very important for them to in a way realize what is their position and not to take a lead in the research from one hand, and on the other hand to make everybody's on the same starting from the same point, since in this kind of research we have a child on one side and two unknown or known people on the other side. So we talked a lot about setting. We talked a lot about how to make children welcome, and how to talk about difficult topics such as violence and not being scared of it, because our researchers previously were also field workers, so we had also this dimension that we had to neutralize before the research, so that they do not mix their roles. And in previous research, we developed also very interesting tool. It was the maps of road, and it really helped us, like a visual technique, in conversation with children, since we were not speaking the same language, and we were not sure that the translators always would come from the area of the child. So maybe some kind of dialects would differ anyway. So we had these maps and we had figures, and we made like safe setting where children could choose what they will use to express themselves. And that was really useful output for us. We got a lot more material than we hoped previously. And also we called them as our co-workers in this previous research. And they liked it so much that most of them, after leaving the research, they told us, you can call us anytime. This consultancy is okay for us. They really felt empowered, and the whole process was kind of fun because it looked like we are playing and getting so much new information. So that is about our small innovations.
Thank you, Anita. Lucy, do you want to say something more about your experience?
So picking up on this point about translation, and it's not just, some things, it's not just the language. When you're working across different contexts, you actually have to adapt tools. And one of the things that, I'll just give you two quick examples. You saw some of the members of the ICCRP's Child and Youth Advisory Committee talking there. We had an international group and we had local committees in each country that we worked in. And one of the things that we found difficult to translate was ethical standards. And when you're working internationally, the PI, the host institution, kicks the ball rolling, and their ethics board is the kind of guardian of the ultimate protocol. We ended up, after it had been through all of our different partners, with a 7-page written consent form, had lots of lovely pictures and diagrams. And when we took this to our local ethics board, the children rolled around in laughter. They rolled around on the floor, they howled, and they said, nobody's going to read that. We don't read anything these days. And so we worked with them and said, well, how do we do consent in a meaningful way? And first of all, they said, well, once they'd understood these concepts, they said, we'll make little videos to help the children understand what research is in general. That's really important. And what the questions are and what they're going to be expected to do. And they had a half-day workshop, and they just took out their cell phones and they made these little videos there and then. And they translated everything, not just into the local Isikosa language, but into youth-friendly Isikosa language and youth-friendly formats. And by just giving them the space to do what they wanted, we then, of course, had to go back to our ethics board, who said, that's lovely, but get them to sign the piece of paper. So, it is, as I said, remember that when you're working with children and young people, number one, they're experts in their own life. They're going to give you lots of insights and wisdom, and really, they will help you resolve some of those challenges that we come across.
The one thing, though, you have to be open to those suggestions. Thank you very much, Lucy. I want to remind all of you that you can ask questions during our discussion, and at the end we can ask those questions. Our panelists will answer them, so please write them down. And in the meantime, I would like to talk a little bit more about the ethical issues. Lucy said a few things about those, but it's very important in the participatory research, especially in children and in this area of violence. So Camille, can you say more about what ethical issues we have to be aware of and how we can do it ethically?
Yeah, no, I think probably like Lucy, this is one of those issues I could talk about for hours, so stop me. I think the first thing to say about ethics is that I think was summed up really beautifully in that video. There's no cookie cutter kind of approach. It's about applying a set of principles and creating a culture of reflective practice. I think that's really important. We can't always anticipate every risk that's going to come up, especially when we're working in different country contexts or with children with different needs and circumstances. So it's about having kind of inbuilt reflective processes and involving young people. I think, again, building on what you said, Lucy, I think one of the kind of resources that we've worked with at the Safer Young Lives Research Centre is a group of young people who are our colleagues who we've met through various research projects and have now become colleagues and are kind of paid members of staff. They're our Young Researchers Advisory Panel. And it's so brilliant because we can go to them, we can pilot things, we can explore issues around how do we present consent, and actually recognising that it's about kind of solving issues together. And I think that reflective practice extends to everybody involved. So I'm thinking of examples from a previous Our Voices project where we were working with 3 country partners, frontline services in Albania, Moldova and Serbia. And they were doing group work with young people affected by sexual violence and related issues. And each organisation was in a very different place, different levels of confidence around participation, different levels of confidence around group work, and bringing the partners together to have and giving space to them to have conversations and share dilemmas in a kind of safe space just felt really invaluable. So for me, I think it's less about we need to do this and this and this, although obviously we know we need to do consent, we know we need to do that, and it's about a kind of culture. And I think the other thing I would say it's about, and I'm sure Anita, you're more of an expert on this than me, but integrating those trauma-informed principles as well. So thinking about how do we promote choice and control at every stage of the process, and we can do that creatively in an interview or focus group with stop, pause, go cards or kind of grounding games and techniques, and we can build that into the consent process. And it's about thinking at every stage, how do we maximize participant choice and control? So I think, yeah, they're kind of key things that jump out for me.
Thank you, Camille. Lucy or Anita, do you want to contribute to this ethical issue? Maybe Anita?
Yeah, I would love to. Now that you mentioned, we were thinking about how can we make this informed consent as an ongoing process, not just that you ask children once if they want to participate, but also to be able to withdraw from the process if they don't feel secure. So we did 2 things. Previous from the research, we have explained the whole concept of the research to their caretakers, so that they get the information from someone who is known to them. And then we would make a contact with the children. When we know that they agreed, firstly from their caretaker, and then we as new people, as a researcher, contacted them and again explained them the whole purpose, and we gave them this informed consent, standard informed consent, but also we gave them opportunity to choose the name. So during our interviews, they choose their name, and this choose name is the name that stayed on our transcripts and on our forms. And we didn't have any issues of children not wanting to participate in some part of the interviews, but we agreed on that they do not need to know or to want to share all their experiences. We were mainly doing these in-depth interviews. So it depended also from the atmosphere. It was not only this consent, but the setting was very important for them to feel safe and not interrupted and supported, so that they can share also something that is not nice or that is painful. And when we made this thing possible, then we got a lot more material. But we also had the other experience where we couldn't make a very safe setting for interviewing children, and those interviews have totally different quality. So this is something we learned about also ethical consideration and the importance of them having their own space where they feel safe and the space is neutral. Because when we interview migrant children in camps, for example, they would always say, in Serbia, they would say that Serbian people are the best one and everybody else are different or they have issues. And when we interview them in Bosnia, then Bosnian people are the best one and everybody else is different. So we accepted this also as a strategy to survive, but it was an important thing for us to make them on a neutral place as much as possible, so that our data is also has certain quality.
Okay, thank you very much, Anita. Oh, Lucy.
I just want to add very quickly in terms of this discussion on some of the ethical issues, is that, you know, when we're doing work with children and young people, particularly when we are engaging them to design the tools and the format, there's often a really strong emphasis on fun activities. And as researchers, when, you know, and the children often find, you know, those processes quite cathartic. And one of the tools that we use a lot is storytelling, obviously working in African contexts. Now we see, typically, we see that the children find this quite cathartic, and we follow up with their caregivers and their personnel, the practitioners and professionals that are caring for them. The researchers often underestimate how traumatic it's going to be. And I find that I refer more of my staff and my field workers for debriefing and counselling and dealing with trauma than I do the children. And it's a really important thing to remember, because often, as I said, we're designing activities, even when we're talking about something as heavy as violence, that are fun and that enable children and young people to open up. So please remember to put in place support networks, not just for the children, but for the adults who are going to be involved in that research.
Yeah, that's very important. Camille, I give you a voice in 1 minute, but I would like you to answer also. You can add to what Lucy said, obviously, but then can you tell us more about the specific funding resourcing issues that needs to be considered?
Yeah, no, I was just going to really strongly endorse what Lucy had said about support for researchers, and also to think about it not just in terms of data collection, but also in the analysis process. And actually, we've sometimes found that it's been less traumatic doing interviews with people face to face. You've got adrenaline, there's relational stuff going on, but when you're faced with lots of testimonies on a page, it can be really difficult. So it's just to kind of add to that. In terms of resources, I think for me, one of the big issues that stands out, which links to ethics, is around resourcing partners, because so often we're engaging children and young people through partners and frontline services, and certainly that's our experience in our voices and work we've done in the UK as well, and recognizing that partners have a really crucial role in safeguarding, in assessing who the opportunities to participate in research is right for, helping have those conversations. You know, as we've pointed out, an information sheet is not enough. It's not adequate for informed consent. Often a lot of that happens around a conversation that might be between a worker and young person, and also the follow-up support that, again, Lucy you just alluded to, that a young person might want access to after sharing their story in a research interaction. So we're relying on them heavily. So I think there's something for me about trying to write proper resourcing for them into funding bids, thinking about reciprocity, and other ways to ensure that our research processes aren't extractive. And I also think if they're properly recompensed, then it's much easier to have kind of a memorandum of understanding between research teams and frontline practitioners to kind of say, to see ourselves as partners and to be able to really make that kind of safety robust. So I think that is a really kind of, yeah, I think for resourcing, for me, that's a kind of crucial kind of element that's very much integrated with the ethics that we're talking about, and recognizing that children and youth participation is intergenerational participation, and that practitioners are part of that, and so kind of attending to them with the same level, those relationships, the same levels of care, I guess.
Thank you, Camille. Anita, do you want to add something on the resources and finding?
Yes, especially about did I want to strongly support this work on vicarious trauma and secondary traumatization of researchers. I'm currently in the process of analyzing 50 plus interviews that's been done with the children experiencing violence on Balkan Road. And I'm one of the researchers. We have a team, and what we found is that we all felt overwhelmed while reading these findings, and also our field researchers that were doing that on the field felt the same way. We didn't have funding for this. You know, funding is always a problem. It's always a challenge. It's never enough. So you're cutting wherever is possible. But I really think that this is important because people felt they overtook the children perspectives of helplessness, and also we really didn't have any resources to meet in person after this. What we could do, we made some forms so that people could write their own impressions on this research form after doing the interview. So we are going to analyze them as well as a part of the research. We met with the field researcher, and we had this weekly online meeting of the researchers, and we were discussing our own impressions about how we felt while reading all these very traumatic experiences and these feelings, what is going to happen next, because we are working with the children who are experiencing violence, but this is not over yet. They are still on the road. So there is not a clear promise, or there is no light on the end of the tunnel, you know. So this was something that made us really concerned, also about how an important thing is to make this as a separate theme on the research, these type of researches, to have all these post-traumatic advisory team, and to make this as a part of the research findings as well. I think it is very important, and it is both ethical and responsible research, and I really hope that on further research we will have opportunity to do so, because we plan to publish also this part of the outcomes that happened to us while analyzing the data.
Thank you, Anita. We have to go to the last question about the benefits, because we talked so much about the difficulties. So we want to end with the question about what are the benefits of involving children in research on violence. Lucy, can you answer this question?
Well, since I'm going first, I'll take the low-hanging and easy answer, in that, you know, children come with very different insights and perspectives to adults. And I'll give you an example. In one of the studies that we were doing, where we were mapping and looking at the drivers of violence, one of the groups came up with, and they said, it's electricity. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And they did this beautiful map on, showing how electricity impacts on their safety. One, not having electricity in their homes means they have to go to external venues to do their homework. Not having street lights made them vulnerable to attack from gang members or drug dealers. There is no electricity, so there's no floodlights in the local sports ground. So in wintertime, the activities that are used to, ensure that youth are engaged in meaningful and supervised activities couldn't happen because there's no lighting. So they made this brilliant case about why electricity was important. It was not something that I've read about in the literature, that I've heard any of my adult colleagues mention. And then not only did they, highlight this issue, they went and spoke to their local councillor and had their village prioritized for getting electricity because of the case that they've made. So yeah, different perspectives always.
Thank you. Camille, would you like to also say something about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's benefits for everyone. I think at a collective level, amplifying children's influence and voices on these issues is part of challenging the cultures of silence and impunity in which these issues flourish, whether that's locally or kind of internationally. I think similarly to Lucy, there's some really nice examples where children's involvement and space for influence has shifted our focus completely. I can think of one example where we were doing kind of group workshops addressing kind of mental health and support after sexual abuse in adolescence. And we created a dice rolling game, partly so that we could talk about these issues in the third person to create some kind of distance and safety. And we had dice for all the different players in young people's lives, social work, education, medical staff, and a group of young people. And we kind of said, these are our ideas, like, what do you think? And an early group of young people said, like, where's friends and peers in this? Like, they're a massive part of our lives as adolescents. They have a massive influence, positive and challenging, and we need to talk about this. You need to change your research questions in focus. And actually what happened is a really similar to what you said about electricity, the kind of significance of something that we hadn't completely overlooked, but we'd underplayed, was really shifted. And similarly, I think that happens when you involve young people in analysis and kind of looking at the patterns that appear. It's another reason to do things visually and say, what do you see? And it's always different, and those priorities are always different. So I think, yeah, and then I suppose the other thing I would say is we did a project with the members of our Young Research Advisory Panel, and we asked them about the relationship between participation work and a sense of protection and safety. And what they came up with, and I'll share a link to the article that we kind of wrote together, were just some amazing insights in terms of how they felt being part of this work, being part of these kind of conversations and critical thinking had really shifted things for them, had shifted their own sense of safety in ways we could never have imagined. That idea of being part of a group and seeing that things have happened to other young people that have happened to you made them think about issues politically rather than personally, reduce their sense of self-blame and shame. And there was all that kind of protective element that was kind of more than we could hope for, I guess. But I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Camille. Anita, would you like to quickly add something to the benefits?
I would like just to quickly add some things about the participation in the research. And of course, it is adding perspective, it is changing perspective, it is a process. Also for not only what we gain as a researcher with this participatory perspective is that we learned a lot about how our services are not very much including children's views. So we read a lot about child migration, trauma work, and no participation with providing these services, almost nothing for them. So if we didn't make the research so as much participative, we would never find out from children how they think that all grown-ups are perceiving them. The only place actually, what we found out, this is our experiences in Bosnia and Serbia, is that what we found out that the only time that their views were heard is during this research. Every other time it was not possible to be heard, or their voices didn't matter at all, even though when they tried to say something. So I really feel that even though we are making some great efforts and moving forward, we still have a lot more to learn, because every time I think, oh, this is participation, I get another level. So it is important to continue this way and to empower also ourselves together with the children to discover new ways of cooperation and making new findings that come from working together.
Okay, thank you. It's very important, Anita. Thank you for mentioning it. We have some questions, so now is the time for the questions from our participants. In a context when research is done with abused girls who stay in institutions, can the consent be given by caregivers in institutions or the relevant government authority? Lucy, can you answer that question?
So that very much depends on the legal context and the jurisdiction that you're working in. So I would have to, in South Africa, I would have to apply to the Minister of Health to get consent in order to do and get consent for girls who are in institutional care, or for any consent that was ignoring parental consent. There have been other examples, but you do need to check along with the international guidelines. You need to look at the guidelines in your own country. Some give exceptions to parental consent, some countries don't. Your ethics board should be able to give you the exact protocols for what is allowed. And in some cases, ethics boards can themselves decide whether or not to grant you a waiver to parental consent. So in short, speak to your ethics board, your local ethics board, and get advice about your situation.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We have one other question. How do we support children from broken homes and separated parents in terms of their education and personality development? I don't know if it's very easy to answer that question, but do you want to say something, Camille, Anita, or Lucy?
I think it's quite hard to answer. Is it in relation to research and involving them in research? I don't know, Vanan. I mean, I think the thing that strikes me again is one of the things as a researcher is recognizing, again, it comes back to the importance of partners and recognizing the limits of our roles and expertise, and knowing that that's why actually when we're working with frontline partners, we recognize they're often the ones with the expertise around these issues, around mental health, around access to education and signposting, but also recognizing when we engage young people in a research process, we have a responsibility not to deliver those services, but to help signpost and help them access it. But I don't know if that fully answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. At the beginning of our panel, we also have a question to you, Lucy. If you can give us some information about how you reconciled the adapted method of gaining consent designed by the young people and the ethics board requirements, or maybe you can send some, link to the when we can read about it, because maybe it's not that easy to answer in few words.
So very briefly, what we effectively did was design a 2-hour workshop that had a variety of different activities, from understanding the rights that were involved. So we were exploring protection, we were exploring participation. So there were a number of games and activities. We had presentations and short videos. And basically we took them through, in using activities, we took them through the consent form and the questions that the ethics board wanted answered. And it really highlighted for us what, you know, it really drove home, well, what does meaningful consent actually mean? You know, children, they require quite a lot of information and processing to really get their heads around what it is you want to do with them, particularly if it's going to be an ongoing project where there are multiple points of connection. You know, it took us, our advisory board were brilliant. It took them about half a day to come up with the activities and things that needed to be explained. And it took me just as long to take the chair of my ethics board through the process so that he could see how children were actually giving consent. And at the end, he accepted that they could sign the form and do a checklist. So they just checked, they had a checkbox to say they'd done these different activities, and yes, no, they understood the concepts that we had broken down. And as I said, the young people just, you know, we were using the resources that are available from Save the Children, Oak Foundation, you know, the things that you've mentioned here, and they just pulled things out and played with it until they got a format that worked. And where there were gaps, as I said, they pulled out their cell phones and they did a little video. They asked us questions if they weren't sure. They got back together, and we then said, I think you've got it a bit wrong. Let's talk about that. But literally, we redesigned that process because we had that energy in half a day.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. I know it's very difficult to answer shortly. The topic is very interesting, but we have to stop now, and because the time is up. So thank you very much for all the questions and answers. We will have some very quick poll. Aisha, I think, will launch it. But also in the chat, all of you can go to the chat and find very interesting materials and links. So please read it. And it's for sure, it's very difficult to talk about this topic in an hour, but we tried.
Thank you so much,
and we'd love to see you all in Cancun.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, everyone. Anika, I'm going to hand over to you very quickly, just while people are handing in the poll, just to say bye to everyone. Thank you to Joanna and our brilliant panelists. This was actually so interesting, and I hope everyone really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and all of the participants. It's been absolutely brilliant. And as Lucy mentioned, there is a pre-conference workshop on this topic at SVRI Forum, and that link is in the chat, and you can also find it online and in the SVRI update. Thanks, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Is there an opportunity to send round links afterwards, Aisha, if we've got things that we think are useful, or people have mentioned things that we'd like to get hold of?
And we have, so we've got a web page on the SVRI website set up just for this. So we have the webinar recording, we have all the links, and we will send a follow-up to everyone who registered, even if they didn't actually come to the session, with everything that you want sent and these resources. So yeah, so that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I thought you guys were all amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing everything, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for
Lovely
being
to
with
meet
us.
talk with you. Bye.
Do you want to stop recording?
Mhm.